1988 when it was carbon dated, and they're very, um, I don't know, very
Anti.
anti-testing. Yes,
Yeah.
and it's not Rome or the Vatican. It's the go-betweeners, the scientists that they're used to dealing with, or the representatives from Turin that they're used to dealing with. These people, they're afraid to test whether such an event like this occurred, and they don't realize they have everything to gain and nothing to lose. If they conducted these tests and it's not demonstrated that particle radiation emanated from this dead body. Now, this is a completely impossible event. This would be proof of a miraculous event that's completely consistent with the resurrection. But if it doesn't show that neutrons irradiated the cloth and created these radioactive atoms, it still wouldn't mean that they wouldn't show that some other form of radiation emanated from the body. And you have everything to gain and nothing to lose, because right now, most people in the world have never heard of the Shroud of Turin. If you look at the world as a whole, most people haven't heard of it. And what relatively few people that have heard of it know very little about it. And worst of all, what little they do know, it's medieval carbon dating is probably wrong. You've got a public that knows next to nothing about the shroud, and what little they do know, they think is probably that it's a medieval forgery. So you're not risking a thing. If it turned out that it wasn't irradiated with particles, well, it doesn't mean it doesn't have anything to do with it. It doesn't prove whatsoever in any way, shape, or form that the events of Good Friday or Easter morning didn't occur. And it wouldn't even prove that the shroud is not Jesus' burial garment. It would just prove that particle radiation didn't emanate from the body. But all it does is eliminate one possible explanation. But this particular explanation explains almost every unique feature on the Shroud of Turin, including its carbon dating, the possible coin and flower images, both full-length unique images, and the still red, pristine blood that's all over the cloth. Experiments have shown that if you irradiate day-and-a-half-old blood and subsequently expose it to ultraviolet light, which would be the same as sunlight, as the shroud received periodically during exhibitions, that the blood stays red, and it appears even redder when it's exposed to UV light. It's just a kind of a quirky quality that neutron radiation can leave. Stop and think about if you've ever cut yourself. The blood doesn't stay red. Within a matter of days, it starts turning dark. Within a matter of hours, it starts turning darker, Yeah. But whether the cloth is medieval or from the first century, it still wouldn't be red. There's many signs that neutrons were involved. And to make a long story short, the signs that you would get if you examine the shroud at the atomic and the molecular levels would be in the billions. You'd have billions of items of unshakable evidence, and it would be these radioactive atoms would be contained within the molecular structure of the linen and its blood marks, and they could only have gotten there by a radiating event. And parts of the cloth, they should have tested the cloth in various locations to begin with, but parts of the cloth would date to the Middle Ages. Other parts of the cloth would date younger, and many parts of the cloth from the body image would date to the future, which is an impossible date.
Wow.
And such an event would also be, the hypothesis also says it would cause the images. Now you can't recreate the images, so you can't absolutely prove that, but you could absolutely prove that such a radiating event that I'm talking about occurred to the cloth and would account for the images and the blood marks. But you've got something very special here. You've got something very unique. And I think it would be a powerful influence in the world.
Well, that gives you a lot to think about. From what little I've known of the Shroud over the years, which is not a whole lot, I've always been undecided on that, but this is all compelling evidence. Tell me about your book. I understand the new book is the second book talking about the Shroud, and you have one from a few years ago.
The one from 2000 was called The Resurrection of the Shroud. It's in this third printing. It's available electronically at all the different outlets. The second book is called Test the Shroud. It should be in bookstores by late summer. It was just printed at the end of last year, and I'm self-publishing this one for various reasons. The publishing companies that were thriving in 2000 have all but disappeared, the smaller ones. This book is available on Amazon.com. It's also available on our website called testtheshroud.com. And it will be available within a few months in Christian and secular bookstores. But the evidence has developed, I think, much more in the last 15 years since the first book was written, why it's even more of a compelling case. And the ability to test at the atomic and the molecular level has also improved in the last 15 years. And the evidence has also increased in many other areas, whether it be science or medicine or archaeology. Most people don't know that the Shroud has been dated by means other than radiocarbon dating. And if a radiating event was involved, it would not alter these results. These results measure things like the strength and the reflectivity of the linen and correlates that with its age and the condition of the linen. Carbon-14 goes at it from a completely different approach. It counts the radioactive atoms. Most people don't realize it, but carbon-14 itself is a radioactive atom that does not naturally exist in nature. Ironically, it's created in the atmosphere by neutrons as a result of cosmic rays hitting the atmosphere, and these are then absorbed by photosynthesizing plants in the form of carbon dioxide, and it's spread all over the biosphere. But you can demonstrate, it's well known. Scientists have known that if you radiate material with neutrons, which scientists learned they could do in the 20th century, that it creates carbon-14 atoms, among other things, within the radiated material.
Sure.
In fact, it was only after that did they realize how carbon-14 is created in the atmosphere in a very, very similar process from neutrons irradiating. The atmosphere consists largely of nitrogen, and so when it irradiates the nitrogen, it creates carbon-14. So The technology or the way this happens has been known since the 20th century, but the ways of detecting it are what's improving. And these new carbon-14 atoms would be, like I said, it would be within the molecular structure of the linen. It's not something you could remove. They would still be there no matter how much you pre-treated the cloth before you carbon dated it. You could never get rid of them. They're in the molecular structure, and they will throw your date off. And scientists can calculate how many was created and how many remain in every part of the cloth, and they would even know how many neutrons every part of the cloth received. I don't know how easily visible this is on radio, but picture the off-image parts of the cloth. And as you sampled the cloth, as your samples got closer to the body image, they would get younger. And if you took a sample from the body image, it would date to the future because the radiation comes from the body, and that part of the cloth that has the body images would have received more neutrons, and it would have created more carbon-14. So, and even the positions on the body, the closer you get to the more massive parts of the body, like the chest or, say, the back of the man near his shoulder blades, where the thickest parts and widest parts of the body are, you would even have your largest dates to the future. You would see a correlation on the off-image samples and the on-image samples that correlate to not only the body, but it correlates to the length and width and depth of the body at a particular location. It's really fascinating. It's just unlike anything you've just ever seen in your life. And I guess it was because I was a lawyer that I just kept pursuing this evidence. It's the most corroborated and consistent and unfakeable evidence I've ever seen. And all you have with carbon-14 dating is just additional carbon-14 atoms caused by this event that you could prove.
Yeah, I understand that the pursuit of this topic, when you first started this, that you were not a believer. And that all changed, is that right?
I was an agnostic, yes, and it made me realize that the events comprising the Passion, Crucifixion, Death, Burial, and Resurrection appear to have been literal events in history, just like they're described in the Gospels and New Testament. And it was the objective and the independent evidence corroborating the historical accounts, which is what made a big impression on a lawyer. But I think this is still valuable even for Christians. It can deepen their faith. And I don't mean at all to say that if the shroud was ever proven to be a forgery, that I would go back to my days as an agnostic. I would not do that. I've had too much of life experiences with Christ in the meantime, in the last 34 years. But it's something that could be particularly relevant to agnostics or atheists or members of other non-Christian religions. It's just as relevant to them as it is to you and I, because every one of us is going to die. And this evidence does not only corroborate the central